The antique silverware gleamed under the soft lighting of my aunt's farmhouse dining room. My cousin Brielle lifted her champagne glass and tapped it with a butter knife. "Everyone, some news," she announced, her voice honeyed and expectant. Her blonde waves shimmered as she flashed a practiced smile. "I've been invited to interview at Rainier and Locke." A hush fell. Even my uncle paused mid-carve with the turkey. Rainier and Locke? The most prestigious financial firm in the Pacific Northwest? Brielle nodded proudly. "Vice President of Strategy. They reached out to me directly." Of course they did. Brielle had always been the golden one. Honors student, Ivy League, every promotion handed to her with a bow. Her triumphs filled the room like perfume, intoxicating and suffocating at once. I stayed quiet, cutting my roast chicken with mechanical precision. At 41, I'd learned how to disappear when needed, but in this family, silence only drew attention. "Aren't you thrilled, June?" My aunt beamed. "Now that's a real position, not like—" She glanced at me. "What is it you do again, dear?" I looked up. "I run a private equity firm." "Oh," Briella giggled. "You mean your little online thing?" My uncle chimed in. "You're not getting any younger, June. Time to think long term." I clenched my jaw. They didn't know about the 9-figure acquisition I was finalizing, or the skyscraper my name would soon sit atop. Not yet. But they would. Soon. Very soon. My uncle raised his glass, glowing with pride for Brielle. I thought about my firm's recent quarterly earnings, the kind most companies only dream of, and had to stifle a grin. "When's the interview?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Monday morning," Brielle replied, smug as ever. "Not that it matters, the job's basically mine." She paused dramatically. "The CEO requested to interview me personally." I almost laughed. I knew the email that had triggered it. Her resume had landed on my desk 2 weeks ago, forwarded from HR with a note that read, "Another legacy candidate with too much confidence. Final decision is yours, Ms. Carlyle." "Well," I said, rising from my chair. "Good luck, Brielle. I've got an early meeting." Brielle snorted. "What, another video call from your couch?" My aunt sighed. "June, when are you gonna let this little independence phase go? Your uncle could have placed you at Rainier years ago." I thought of the polished plaque on my corner office door. June Carlyle, CEO, Rainier and Law Capital. "You're right," I said, calmly gathering my things. "Maybe it is time for a change." They thought I was surrendering. They had no idea. On the drive back to my townhome in Queen Anne, something else they assumed I was renting, I let myself think back. It started 13 years ago, just after I finished my MBA. Brielle had always been the one to watch, while I quietly studied, quietly built. They mocked my consulting firm, ignored my wins, never noticed the small companies I revived or how I used shell corporations to take over Rainier and Locke when its founder stepped down 5 years ago. They never cared enough to track business news. Tomorrow morning, Brielle would walk into my boardroom and call me ma'am. Too busy celebrating Brielle's every safe, calculated move, my family never noticed that their directionless daughter had quietly become one of the most powerful women in finance. As I pulled into the underground garage of my Queen Anne townhome, my phone buzzed. A text from Brielle. "You should stop by Rainier sometime. I'll show you around once they hire me. It's a real firm. You'll be amazed." I laughed softly, gazing up at the lights of my firm's headquarters from my driveway. My corner office, with its 180-degree city view, was the one she'd raved about in her cover letter. Tomorrow was going to be illuminating. Upstairs, I poured tea and pulled out her resume again. It looked solid. Good schools, consistent promotions, glowing references. But I'd done the digging. The real story was in the footnotes. The interns she scapegoated. The reports she rebranded as her own. The trail of shortcuts masked by charm. Brielle had always been a performer. Tomorrow, she'd learn that I read scripts. And write them, too. Another buzz. This time from my aunt. "Sweetheart, I hope you don't feel bad. Brielle's just had more structure. Let us help you find something stable." I let the message sit unread. In my home office, I scanned the headlines lining the wall. Forbes, Bloomberg, Fast Company. The quiet queen of capital. June Carlisle reshapes the future of finance. They never asked why I changed my last name, or how I bought out their beloved firm without a whisper. I sent one final email before bed. Please schedule Miss Brielle Langston's interview for 9 a.m. clockwise a.m. my office. Let her wait 30 minutes before being called in. A small, theatrical touch. Earned. Tomorrow, my family would finally see who I became when they stopped watching. If you've ever been underestimated by the ones who should have known you best, subscribe to the channel and stay with me, because what happens when Brielle walks into my office next is something you won't want to miss. Through the glass walls of my office, the city skyline shimmered beneath a soft spring haze. My navy blazer was perfectly tailored, my heels echoing with quiet authority across the polished concrete as I stepped out of the elevator. "Good morning, Miss Carlisle," my executive assistant Priya greeted me with a faint, knowing smile. "Your 9 o'clock arrived early." "How early?" I asked, checking the time on my watch. 8:45, Aimim. She's been in the lobby for 20 minutes, claims she was personally requested by the CEO. I set my leather briefcase on the desk and slipped out of my coat. "Let her wait another 10. How's she doing?" Priya chuckled. "She's demanded oat milk lattes, name-dropped half the executive board, and told the front desk you were her confused cousin who still thinks consulting is a career." I grinned. "Has she noticed the magazine covers yet?" "She hasn't looked up once," Priya said. "Too busy, performing." Classic Brielle. So focused on branding herself, she never noticed whose brand actually runs the place. The press coverage lining the lobby wall? All featuring me. My face, my story, my quiet climb. She patted her resume too, Priya added, laying a folder on my desk. I ran a full audit. Fluffed numbers, inflated roles. And that marketing award she brags about? It was your team's. I nodded, unsurprised. Like that science fair project she won in '05? The one I built while she was doing choreography? Priya laughed. Exactly. Send her up at 9 sharp, I said. And Priya, make sure security records the lobby feed. I'd like to archive this for personal viewing. At precisely 9 o'clock IMI, my desk phone buzzed. "Miss Langston is here for her interview. Send her in." The door opened. Brielle strutted in confidently until she saw me behind the CEO's desk. The color drained from her face. "June," she gasped. "What? What are you doing here?" I smiled. "Good morning, Brielle. Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss. About your application." "But I'm supposed to meet the CEO," she stammered, voice cracking. I gently turned my nameplate toward her. "This would be me." "June Carlisle," I said, folding my hands on the desk. "Though I'm not surprised you never made the connection. You never really noticed anything I did." Brielle dropped into the chair across from me, her trademark composure unraveling. This can't be real. You're just a consultant. You work from your apartment." "Actually," I replied, leaning back with quiet satisfaction, "I own this building, and 4 more like it." I slid her resume across the desk. "Rainier & Locke has been my company for the last 5 years. Now, let's talk about your application. I have a few questions." Her voice cracked. "You can't be the CEO. You're nobody." I didn't flinch. "That's what you all thought, isn't it? Poor June. Always the afterthought, the backup plan, the girl with a freelance phase." I watched her squirm. "Tell me, Brielle, did you ever once ask what kind of consulting I did? What companies I worked with? Or were you too busy listing your own average accomplishments at every dinner table?" She lowered her eyes. No. I didn't." I nodded. "None of you did. You were all too busy dismissing me to recognize what I was building." I opened her file. "Now, about this claim, doubling your department's revenue single-handedly?" "That's accurate," she said too quickly. But her eyes betrayed her. "Interesting," I replied, pulling out a printed report. because your company's annual growth last year was 30%, and the credit, according to your peers, goes to a junior team you initially vetoed. Her face went crimson. You've been investigating me? I investigate all senior executive candidates. We hold high standards here. My phone buzzed. Priya's voice came over the speaker. Ms. Carlyle, your aunt and uncle are in the lobby. They're demanding to see you. Of course they were. Send them up, I said with a calm smile. Looks like we're due for a proper family meeting. Brielle shifted in her seat. June, look, about last night. About everything I said, Brielle began, her voice thin. Save it, I cut her off, calm but sharp. I'm not interested in apologies born out of panic. You spent years mocking me, brushing off everything I worked for. Now you'll sit and learn exactly who your underachieving cousin really is. The office door burst open. My aunt and uncle stormed in, expressions twisted in a cocktail of confusion and offense. June, my aunt gasped. What is going on here? What are you doing in the CEO's office? Good morning, I said coolly, not rising. I was just reviewing Brielle's application. You're welcome to join. We were discussing qualifications, specifically honesty and results. My uncle's voice sharpened. Enough of this ridiculous charade. You're humiliating your cousin. I stood slowly, letting the weight of my presence quiet the room. No, Uncle David. For once, you'll listen. I pressed a button on my desk. The frosted glass behind me flickered into a panoramic display. Charts, headlines, acquisition records. Financial growth under my leadership. Welcome to Rainier and Locke, I said. The firm you brag about at dinner parties. The one Brielle applied to, desperate to climb inside. The company reshaped by the woman you all dismissed. They stared, stunned, at the numbers, the headlines, Fortune, Bloomberg, Forbes, my name on every one. This can't be, my aunt whispered, sinking slowly into the leather armchair. This is all yours? Every line, I said, walking around the desk. The consulting firm you mocked? Just the foundation. While Brielle was bragging about quarterly reports she barely wrote, I was transforming failing companies. My uncle finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I did, you just never listened. Brielle's voice cracked. June, if we'd known. I raised a brow. Exactly. If. I cut her off. You only care now because of what I've built, not who I am. This isn't about pride, it's about power. And now that I have it, suddenly I matter. I pressed another button on the desk. The screen behind me shifted again. Security footage from last night's dinner. Brielle's voice rang out, clear and smug. She can't even get a real job. Stop, Brielle whispered, her face burning. We get it. Do you? I turned to her, sharp now. Because I've been watching you stitch your career together from half-truths and stolen credit. I've spoken with your former managers, your so-called mentors. I know how you got where you are. My aunt stood, adjusting her silk scarf nervously. June, surely we can find a solution. We're family after all. I picked up Brielle's resume. Family, like when she took credit for my science project? Or when she told her college friends I dropped out because I started my firm instead of joining hers? That kind of family? I was young, Brielle muttered. We all make mistakes. Yes, we do, I said coldly. And now you live with yours. There was a knock. Priya entered with a thick folder. The background investigation you requested, Miss Carlyle. Thank you, I said, flipping it open. Falsified achievements. Workplace bullying reports, plagiarized campaigns. Brielle's face went ghostly. Those were never proven? Because your father paid to bury them, I finished. But I don't bury misconduct. Rainier and Locke runs on integrity. My uncle stepped forward, tone suddenly businesslike. June, let's talk about this privately. No need for drama. You lost that privilege, I replied calmly. When you let her mock me, when you offered to help me find a real job, when you showed me, again, that nothing I did would ever be enough. I pressed another button. The office door opened. Harold Bennett, my general counsel, stepped in. "Harold," I said smoothly, "please inform my family about the consequences of submitting fraudulent information on an executive application." Harold adjusted his glasses. "Falsifying credentials at this level is grounds for immediate disqualification and in some cases legal action." Silence. And I let it sit. "Especially," Harold continued, "if former employers choose to pursue defamation or intellectual property theft." Brielle's poise shattered. "You wouldn't," she gasped. "You can't." "Can't what?" I asked, my voice calm. "Protect this company? Enforce standards I expect from every other applicant? Or are you asking for a pass? Because your family—" "June, please," my aunt pleaded, her voice suddenly fragile. "Think about the damage this could do to our reputation." I tilted my head. "You mean like the damage you all did to mine? With the years of smug comments and dismissive remarks?" I shook my head slowly. "Brielle's application is rejected, effective immediately, and I'll be forwarding our findings to her current employer. They deserve to know who's representing their brand." Brielle burst into tears. But they weren't her usual manipulative cries. These were different. Raw. Real. The sound of consequences finally catching up. I turned to my aunt and uncle. "You should think carefully about how you've treated your daughters. One you praised endlessly despite deception. The other you dismissed despite her honesty and success." My uncle's jaw tightened. "You're enjoying this? Humiliating your family?" "No," I replied. "I'm doing what you should have done a long time ago. Holding people accountable." I walked to the window, gazing out at the skyline I now partly owned. "The worst part?" I asked softly. "If any of you had paid attention, genuinely, you'd have known. My name has been in the business press for years. You just never look." I turned back to them. "Now, I have a board meeting." I sat down. "Harold will escort you out. Brielle, expect official notice in writing." "June," my aunt tried again, "we can fix this. We're still family." I met her eyes. "We're related, but family requires respect, and I've had none." As the door closed behind them, Priya entered with coffee. "You okay?" she asked gently. I opened my drawer and glanced at the old family photo tucked inside. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. Not of my aunt, uncle, or Brielle, but of my grandfather. The only one who ever believed in me without needing proof. "You know what, Priya?" I said, exhaling deeply. "Yeah, I really am okay." Over the next few months, everything shifted. Brielle's employer launched a quiet but thorough investigation into her past work. The result? A resignation that wasn't exactly voluntary. My aunt and uncle stopped showing up in the society pages. Their polished reputation faded, dulled by the uncomfortable truth that they had dismissed the daughter who built an empire while praising the one who borrowed legacies. I stayed focused, grew Rainier and Locke, led new acquisitions, mentored startups. The story eventually got out. The anonymous CEO who built an empire under the radar while her own family called her a failure. It sparked headlines, podcasts, conference invites. 6 months later, I received a letter from Brielle. Not an email, a real handwritten apology. She'd taken an entry-level job, her first without family favors. She finally understood what real work looked like. My aunt's letter came months after. Humbled, hesitant, asking for the chance to know me. Not the version they had imagined, but the woman I had become. I keep both letters in my desk, beside my grandfather's photo. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. 1 year later, I was in my office, reviewing quarterly growth reports, when Priya walked in with the newest issue of Forbes. June Carlisle, The Power of Quiet Success. No mention of family drama, no headlines about betrayal. The story of what we'd built, the industry we were changing. Because real success doesn't shout, it simply endures.